Mary.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. One on the United States Institute of Peace, and then on the Supreme Court, if that's okay.
Sure.
So on the United States Institute of Peace, this is a little bit wild. I understand the old president refused to leave after he was removed from his position. He barricaded himself in his offices, had to be escorted out by police, left the building without Wi-Fi, telephones, elevators, and more, and is now telling media that Doge broke in and illegally removed him. So can you comment on this sequence of events and specify, did Doge illegally enter?
I'm really glad you brought this up, Mary. We were made aware of this story by individuals at Doge, at Elon Musk's team, and also at the State Department who were unable to access this building. And it became very clear that there was a concerted effort amongst the rogue bureaucrats at the United States Institute of Peace to actually physically barricade themselves essentially inside of the building to prevent political appointees of this administration who work at the direction of the President of the United States to get into the building. There was a piece in the Daily Caller, thank you for sharing the truth on this, about what happened. Staff contacted the MPD in an attempt to prevent Doge personnel from entering. They barricaded the doors. They also disabled telephone lines, internet connections, and other IT infrastructure within the building. They distributed flyers internally, encouraging each other to basically prevent these individuals from accessing the building. I use this to say this is what Doge and this administration is facing. It's a resistance from bureaucrats who don't want to see change in this city. President Trump was elected on an overwhelming mandate to seek change and implement change, and this is unacceptable behavior.
Thank you. And just really quick on the Supreme Court, I know it's been almost 3 years now since the leak of the draft Dobbs opinion to Politico, actually. A leak which sparked protesting outside the homes of the justices and even brought on one attempted assassination attempt. I know Justice Alito said that it made the justices targets for assassination, but yet the Supreme Court has not tracked down any leaker. Does the White House have interest in finding out who that leaker was, and can you comment on that at all?
I know generally speaking the president has an interest in finding leakers and he believes it's unacceptable, and it's the position of this administration. You've seen the Secretary of Homeland Security has taken tough action at her agency. Leaking is unacceptable to this president and to the leaders across the board in this cabinet, especially when it puts people in harm's way. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. A mom whose daughter was forced to change in a locker room with a biological male at school filed a complaint with the DOJ. How will the Trump DOJ deal with violations of President Trump's orders protecting women and girls like this?
I would defer you to the Department of Justice on that specific case, but the president has made it incredibly clear that it is the policy of this administration that there are only two genders, male and female, only two sexes rather, male and female, and that we are not going to tolerate such behavior by men pretending to be women. The president will continue to strongly stand for the rights of women and girls, not just in sports and on athletic fields, but also in private spaces like locker rooms and bathrooms. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the FTC, two quick questions. Can you explain the president's thinking in his decision to fire the two Democratic commissioners, especially given that Mark Meadow is on track to be confirmed next week and there would be a Republican majority? My biggest question is why now?
Sure, because the time was right to let these people go, and the president absolutely has the authority to do it, and they were given ample notice in a letter that I believe your outlet reported on, so it pretty much explains exactly why this administration chose to let those individuals go.
Is the ultimate goal to get this to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the 1935 precedent?
The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will. Rachel.
Back to those deportation flights to El Salvador, can the administration provide any more details on how authorities determined that each of those men were in fact members of a gang? And if the White House can publish images, photos, videos of those men, why can't the administration just release basic information like their identities and names?
We are not going to reveal operational details about a counterterrorism operation, but what I can assure you, as I said on Monday, we have the highest degree of confidence in our ICE agents and our Customs and Border Patrol agents who have committed their lives to targeting illegal criminals in our country, particularly foreign terrorists, and they had great evidence and indication. They have the highest degree of professionalism, and they were 100% confident in the individuals that were sent home on these flights and in the president's executive authority to do that.
Just to follow up, I know in the last briefing you cited privacy concerns as a reason why the administration may not be able to reveal the identities what exactly are the privacy rights of immigrants who were deported that the administration says were dangerous enough to be sent to El Salvador and sit in a prison?
Again, as I just said, we're not going to reveal the operational details of a counterterrorism operation for quite obvious reasons. We're trying to combat terrorism here in the United States of America. Jeff.
I could ask something else about the phone call yesterday. There was a couple different readouts from the Kremlin and the U.S. on a couple different points. One was energy and infrastructure. The U.S. statement said energy and infrastructure. The Kremlin said energy infrastructure. What is your understanding of what the actual substance of that disagreement was? Then I have one other question on that.
I would defer you to the readout that was provided by the White House. That's our understanding, and that's the truth.
And if I could ask a question about the judge as well. How does a president define a bad judge? Is it just someone who disagrees with him? And is that a dangerous precedent in this case, because this is a temporary ruling from Judge Boasberg that he could ultimately rule in your favor? Is he setting up a standard here for calling for the impeachment of a judge who may ultimately rule on your side?
No, it has nothing to do with disagreeing with the president on policy. It's with disagreeing with the Constitution and the law. And it's trying to usurp the authority of the executive branch of this country. It's having baseless reasoning for these injunctions. And it's a clear effort by these judges to slow roll this president's agenda. And if you just look at the injunctions that this president has faced, deporting foreign terrorists from our homeland, hiring and firing of executive branch employees, which when the president is the executive of the executive branch. You also see an injunction by a partisan activist judge when it comes to the Secretary of Defense trying to determine the readiness of our troops and the qualifications of our troops in our armed forces. Does a single district court judge really have more authority over the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense to determine who should serve in our United States Armed Forces? Absolutely not. Anyone who has taken a basic civics lesson can understand that, and it's ridiculous lawfare that we are witnessing.
The president said he supports. The president said he respects the Chief Justice here. Does he respect him specifically on this case and this opinion, or respects him overall? And has he spoken to any other Supreme Court justices?
The president respects Chief Justice Roberts overall. He just expressed that to me in the Oval Office, but it's also quite clear that the Supreme Court needs to rein in these judges who are acting as partisan activists, and they are undermining the judicial branch, and it's a dereliction of duty on their behalf. Deanna, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Caroline. On the call with Zelensky, did they discuss the minerals deal at all? Is that back on the table, and what do the Ukrainians have to do to get that back on the table? And then one on the Russia call as well.
Again, I just provided a very lengthy readout of the call that was provided by the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. And now we have moved beyond the economic minerals deal. We are at a place of peace. We're at a partial ceasefire, and we're moving towards a full ceasefire and a long-standing peace in this conflict. And that's great news for the American public.
The Kremlin readout mentioned that Trump and Putin spoke about potential U.S.-Russia hockey games. And the Kremlin readout also said that Russia wanted the U.S. to stop U.S. intelligence and U.S. funding to Ukraine. The president has said that that conversation did not happen. Just wondering if you can get us any more clarity on that. And also, again, if it's energy infrastructure or if it's energy and infrastructure, because I think there is a big difference between that.
Again, as for the readouts of the call, I would defer you to ours. And when it comes to the topic of hockey, it did come up. However, we're more interested in securing a peace deal than scheduling hockey games right now. Sean.
Hey, about the deportation flight. So was it the president himself who directed the planes to stay in the air after the judge ordered them to turn back?
The president invoked the Aliens Enemies Act with a proclamation, which then directed the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to move forward with the plan of action. And as I said yesterday, all of the planes that were subject to the judge's written order took off before the order was submitted in court. I was asked and answered that question multiple times yesterday. Kate, go ahead.
Is the president still considering pressuring Russia with sanctions or tariffs to try to get a full ceasefire? And is there any kind of deadline or timeline that the White House has in mind for when that pressure might ramp up?
Again, the president had a nearly 2-hour-long call with President Putin yesterday. We provided a readout of that call, and we have his negotiating team heading to the Middle East this week to continue these discussions in regards to sanctions and any other details. I'm not going to give a readout of those from this podium.
And on TikTok, is Oracle the leading contender for a deal? And would the U.S. back a deal that keeps TikTok's algorithm and the underlying technology still in Chinese hands?
As President Trump does so well, we don't get ahead of ourselves when we are in the midst of the art of the deal. So when the president and his team are ready to announce a deal on TikTok, which is a high priority for the president, we will make that known. I've seen that reporting, but I'm not going to comment on it just yet. Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Press Secretary Leavitt. Some prominent Trump supporters have been making the case that Derek Chauvin deserves a pardon. They argue that he did not receive a fair trial. Joe Biden and other Democrats actually implied that he was guilty while the trial was going on. BLM rioters had these jurors under immense threat and pressure. Mainstream media, frankly, many news outlets here today are complicit here. They chose to ignore the autopsy report. They chose to ignore the full body camera footage. They decided to slander Derek Chauvin as a racist cop instead. Does the administration believe Derek Chauvin received a fair trial, and will they consider a pardon moving forward?
The president has been asked and answered this question. He said it's not something he's considering at this time. Philip.
Thank you. Two questions. First, just a follow-up on the readouts from those calls. When it comes to the discrepancies between the U.S. and Russian readout of that call between President Trump and Putin, is it the president's assessment that something is getting lost in translation, or does he believe that the Russians are trying to play games here?
Nope. The president believes in his team that put the readout out, and he also put his own out on Truth Social. We've been incredibly transparent about all of the president's calls with foreign leaders, and again, I would defer you to the readout.
And then following up
Michael.
on...
Thank you, Caroline. White House said yesterday that gas prices across the U.S. have fallen for the fourth straight week. 34 states now seeing gas under $3 a gallon. This limited ceasefire with Ukraine regarding oil refineries, energy, will that affect gas prices here in the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly the president's hope that gas prices will continue to fall, and he's working every single day to ensure that we do. As you just mentioned, there's been very encouraging data. Inflation is cooling and gas prices are falling. The president has established a National Energy Dominance Council, and it's ultimately the president's goal. And this administration is working hard on it every single day to increase our energy production right here in the United States of America, to have a Trump energy boom like we saw in our first term, which will not only lead to lower fuel prices here at home, but also lessen the rate of inflation that was created by the previous administration.
One more on Tesla, Caroline. Tim Waltz, Governor Waltz, saying last night he frequently checks Tesla stock, in doing so to, quote, give me a little boost during the day. How should Americans view politicians who take pride in the downfall of an American car company?
I think that's quite sad, but I think Governor Walz unfortunately is living a sad existence after his devastating defeat on November 5th. Reagan, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. Across the country, Tesla cars are being lit on fire, dealerships are being shot up, Molotov cocktails are being used. There was a website posted yesterday that shared the addresses of private Tesla owners and reportedly had Kash Patel's information on it. AG Bondi has called this acts of domestic terrorism. Does the White House have any indication that this is some sort of coordinated movement or that it's being funded by some outside group? And do you know if the investigation by the DOJ is being investigated as incidents of organized terror?
I believe the Attorney General has made her comments clear on that. She is investigating these events as acts of domestic terrorism, and we fully condemn them. And as I said earlier to Jackie's question, we think it's despicable what is happening to not just this American company, but also their innocent employees. And again, innocent Americans who drive these vehicles. And we condemn it wholeheartedly. Sure.
More than 24,000 workers in 18 agencies are in the process of being reinstated. What is your message to these workers, and can you assure them they won't be fired again as the administration directs agencies to do more layoffs?
Well, the administration is complying with the court's order. Again, as I have spoken about repeatedly, we think it's despicable that we have judges acting as judicial activists, partisan activists, trying to dictate who the President of the United States, the executive of the executive branch, can hire and fire. We have never seen anything like this. We are fighting this in court, and we will continue to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to. And as for federal employees, it's been the very common sense position of this president and the administration that bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. need to show up to the office just like the rest of America. Middle-class Americans, from doctors to business owners to teachers to law enforcement officers, have to show up to their offices every single day. And the president has made it a clear priority that people in this city have to do the same. And we are also continue to be committed to reducing the scale of our workforce and to reducing the size of our federal bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C. to save taxpayers' money. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much. In the statement that you read, you referenced the president's interest in helping return Ukrainian children to their parents and to their families. There's an organization that provides intel and information about those children that their aid has been cut. It's a Yale University program that used foreign aid. And I'm curious if, as part of this new thinking with Ukraine, that aid might be unfrozen.
I have no updates about that or that specific program at this time. Karen.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on your answer to the question on the minerals deal, you said that the White House has moved beyond the minerals deal. What does that mean? Is that no longer on the table?
Nope. It means the minerals deal was that first set of framework that you all saw in that very public meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump in the Oval Office. We are now focused on a long-term peace agreement. As you know, on that deal, or that meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump, the Ukrainian president at the time wasn't talking about a greater peace deal. We are now at that place where we are talking about that. So we've moved beyond just the economic minerals deal framework, and we're looking at a lasting ceasefire. Right now we're at a partial ceasefire, but again, the president is sending his highly skilled, intelligent, and experienced team to Saudi Arabia later this week to continue fighting for peace in this conflict. And I would just reiterate one more time, we have never been closer to peace than we are today. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you later.